Hello, my name is Daniel Chodos. This is my colleague Marc Kitay. We're both lawyers for Whitten and Lublin employment lawyers, and we're here to talk to you today about severance payments.
Our topic for today is going to be the top 5 myths regarding severance packages. So let's dive into it with myth number 1, which is the Employment Standards Act and the Ministry of Labor are here to solve your problems. What many people don't realize is that the Employment Standards Act is really just the minimum wage of severance packages. Most people don't realize that your severance entitlements are governed by a very generous and broad category, and the Employment Standards Act is effectively the equivalent of your minimum wage. Now, the Ministry of Labor is just there to enforce that minimum wage. So any complaint to the ministry would only result in those bare minimums and deprive you from something much greater. So the number 1 myth we like to dispel is don't go to the ministry when it comes time to solve your severance problems.
Myth number 2, there's a rule of thumb that you get 1 month per year of service. I can't tell you how often we hear this myth. It can be true that 1 month per year of service is what you're entitled to, in the same way that a broken clock is right twice a day. But that's not necessarily going to be the case. I've done cases where I have a 3-year employee that's entitled to 9 months pay, and I have a 12-year employee that's entitled to 6 months pay. It's all very context driven, and you're only going to appreciate that context if you either delve into the case law on a regular basis like we do, or you speak to an employment lawyer.
Myth number 3, contractors are not entitled to severance packages. While this may be true under some circumstances, the courts have carved out a new category of contractor called a dependent contractor. Now, this is similar to being a normal independent contractor who's not entitled to severance pay. However, the contractor in this situation will have built a dependency on their employer for their wages and for their job security. And the courts have now actually realized that under these circumstances, the dependent contractor is actually entitled to very similar severance entitlements as just a regular employee would be.
Yes, and similarly, when it comes to employment contracts, I've heard a myth very regularly that employment contracts are useless. That couldn't be further from the truth. Whether you're an employee or an employer, employment contracts can be of serious value or can seriously deprive you of your rights. It all depends on the content, and so much can go to anything from post-employment obligations to confidentiality, to probably top of our list, termination provisions, so something which dictates what your rights are when the employment relationship ends. And so they're of extreme importance, and it's one of the number 1 areas that we're dealing with is either drafting or addressing in some way or another the effect of an employment agreement.
And finally, let's go into myth number 5, which is online severance calculators are a replacement for legal advice. Now, online severance calculators are a great tool. They're a great way for employees to have a rough idea of where they might fall and place their current offer or their current position with their employer into context of what their legal entitlement should be. The problem with severance calculators is they can't account for the many nuances involved in calculating severance packages. So, for example, the law is ever evolving, and it takes an experienced employment lawyer to navigate that evolution of the law and to actually apply it to an employee's real-world circumstances. Similarly speaking, severance calculators often will give you a range. So it may be you're entitled to anywhere from 12 months to 18 months, and it takes an experienced employment lawyer to put you at the higher end of the equation. And similarly, there's a number of very minor and marginal factors that often won't be factored into a severance pay calculator that could very well have a tremendous impact on an employee's severance entitlement. So while we certainly say these are great tools and great ways to get a rough idea of where you should be, they're certainly not a replacement for independent legal advice.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time today. Appreciate you joining us in our little room here. You can find our website at www.toronto-employmentlawyer.com. You'll also see that at the bottom of your screen, as well as our phone number, which is 416-640-2667. Marc, thanks for joining me today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.